Welcome everybody to Torah is for Everyone. Tonight we're going to be dealing with, or we're going to be looking at Pinchas, who was a hero. So I welcome Jerry Lipstein, Miriam Berenbaum, Brian Benjamin Schulman. Good to see you all. And I'm going to now share the screen so we can go and read what the Torah says. And I'm going to use the version called Sefaria. And one of the reasons that I like it, I don't like all the translation of it. That's why I have also the other one that I use, the other translation. But this one gives you the commentaries of some of our sages. So I want to begin, to tell you the truth, I don't understand why the parasha begins with verse, I think it's 10, but I want to go back just to the beginning of 25, just to put things in context. So we see where we're beginning with Pinchas, because that's what it's called. Pinchas is the name of the Levite, and our sages say that his name comes from two words, Pinachash, from the mouth of the snake. And maybe we'll see that the serpent's mouth. We'll see that maybe we can think of why he would be named that. While Israel was staying at Shittim, the men profaned themselves by whoring with the Moabite women, who invited the men to the sacrifices for their God. The men partook of them and worshipped that God. Thus Israel attached itself to Baal Peor, and Yud-He Vav-He, Adonai, was incensed, angry with Israel. So we see here, this is the stage being set for what Pinchas is going to do. Immediately we see that they're breaking the very first commandment that God had given them at Mount Sinai, have no other gods. And here they're worshiping the god Baal Peor, which obviously had a lot of sexual rights. Because these young women invited these men to sacrifice to their God. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the ringleaders, all the leaders, and have them publicly impaled before the Lord, so that the Lord's wrath may be turned away from Israel. So Moses said to Israel's officials, to the judges, each of you slay those of his men who attached himself to Baal Peor. Very similar to when Moses came down to Mount Sinai, from Mount Sinai, and the men were worshiping the golden calf. The Levites were told to slay some of their own people, their own relatives, their own men who had done that. And here Moses told the judges to slay those of his own, from his own tribe. Imagine. Just then, at this moment, a certain Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and of the whole community of Israel, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now, maybe they were weeping because God had just told them that a lot of their people were going to be killed. So maybe they were crying out to Moses to have God change his mind. But right in that moment, came this young couple. Now, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, so Aaron was his grandfather, he saw this. In other words, Pinchas was a Levite. He saw this. He left the assembly. He took a spear in his hand. He followed the Israelite man into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the Midianite woman, through the belly. So obviously they were close together, doing one of their sexual rituals, I guess. Then the plague against Israel was stopped. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. This is 8 times more than we saw at Mount Sinai. I always look at that number 8. 8 in Gematria means a new beginning. So this was meant to be a new beginning for our people. Now that's just the background from last week. And now this week is called Pinchas. I don't know why they would have broken it up that way, why they didn't just start Pinchas at verse 1. Anyway, but the rabbis decided to do that for whatever their reasons. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest. See, that was repeated twice. It means there's a reason for that. God, he wants us to know who this man was. It was important, his position. Pinchas has turned back my anger from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion or his zeal for me, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my zeal. So I granted him, it says, et briti shalom, my covenant of peace, of shalom. That to me is very powerful. You know, I'm writing the message for this week, and so the portion is on my mind all the time as I'm reading it and thinking about it. And I was thinking about this covenant of shalom. Now, Pinchas was a Levite. He was a priest. We were all called to be a kingdom of priests. So those of us who follow God are part of his kingdom of priests. And here he's giving him his pact, his covenant of shalom. And as I was walking last evening, I had such a sense of shalom, just like knowing that God is with me, and there's so many things that are going on in the world and among the people who are part of our community. And yet, when God covers us, all the things that we struggle with and we turn to him, they get handled. It's almost a miracle. And I had that sense of his covenant of peace. It shall be for him and his descendants after him, a brit kehunat olam, the pact of his priesthood for all time. So those of us who follow in his footsteps, we will inherit that as well, because he took impassioned, zealous action for his God. Thus, he made expiation. He stood in the gap for the Israelites, and God's wrath was turned away. Now we're going to look at a little bit about who these young people were who had the chutzpah to do what they did. The name of the Israelite man who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, chief of the Simeon ancestral house, or the tribe of Simeon. Now, I don't know if you remember, there was a story back in, I don't know if it was Exodus or late, to tell you the truth, I don't remember where it was, but we see the two brothers, the eldest brother, the eldest son was Reuben. The next two sons are Levi and Simeon. These were really close guys. And when Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, was raped, Simeon and Levi devised a plan to go, and that chieftain's daughter was of that tribe. Where were they? Shechem. It was in Shechem. So the chief of that tribe, the son went to his chief and said, please, I love her. I want her to be mine. But he violated her. And Simeon and Levi were so upset, and Judah said nothing. So the two of them went in and made a deal with them. And he said, the only way that we will accept what you want, what Dinah, is if you're all circumcised. So they all got circumcised. And on the third day, when the pain was the worst, these two boy chicks took all their tribe, their people, and they went in and they killed everybody in Shechem, all the men. So you can see that these two were pretty heavy dudes, but Levi did something very different than Simeon. Levi, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai at the time of the golden calf, and he said, "Who is standing with me?" Levi went with him, and that day they killed 3,000. So he made restitution. They made restitution, and they stopped the plague that hit them at that time. And here we have a plague that killed 24,000, and the same tribe, Levi, Pinchas, goes ahead and does the killing to stop this plague, which is much bigger. Now here we have the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosby, daughter of Zur. He was the tribal head of the ancestral home in Midian. Now, Pinchas wouldn't have had a problem with her if she was just a Midianite, because guess what? Pinchas's mother was a Midianite. Midianites were Moses's family. They were Midianites. So our Midianites were not our enemies. They were our relatives. His sons, Moses' sons, were Midianites. But these two were so arrogant and so proud that they went up against the God of Israel and brought our people to their God. The Lord said to Moses, saying, "Attack the Midianites and defeat them, for they attacked you by trickery, by deceit. They practiced against you because of the affair of Peor, because of the affair of Cosby, daughter of Midianite chieftain, who was killed at the time of the plague on account of Peor." When the plague was over, the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron the priest, to Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, "Take a census of the whole Israel company of fighters." These were going to be the army, from the ages of 20 years up, by their ancestral houses, all Israelite males able to bear arms. So Moses and Eleazar the priest on the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho gave instructions about them, namely from those from the ages of 20 and up, as the Lord had commanded. The eligible male descendants of the Israelites who came out of Egypt were, and now they're going to name all the descendants who were called to be in the army. Reuben was the firstborn, as I said before. Then we have, then you see how many people are in the clan of the Reubenites, 43,730. And it's going to continue on. Here we see the sons of Eliab, Datan and Abiram. Remember those who were part of Korach's band. God is reminding us what our people did in the past when the earth opened and swallowed them up with Korach, when that band died, when the fire consumed 250 men, and they became an example. But here it says, the sons of Korach did not die. And we see later when we read the Psalms that the sons of Korach wrote some beautiful psalms that were sung. Then we have the descendants of Simeon. And we go down, we have descendants of Gad and Judah. Remember the two, Er and Onan, who died, and Judah and Shelah. I'm not going to read them all because I really didn't go into study what these mean. And if you're interested, you can always go and look it up. What are the meaning of the numbers? For me, it's not of interest to me. When I look at the Torah, I want to say, okay, what does this have to do for us today? But here we see that these men were all important enough to be named, just as we are important enough to be named and remembered by God. Here we see the sons of Joseph became Manasseh and Ephraim. So we know that there weren't 12 clans, there were 13 tribes. Gilead, Shem, Zelophehad, who we're going to read about a little bit later. Zelophehad, son of Hefer, had no sons, only daughters. The names of Zelophehad's daughter were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Their names are going to be repeated again, and usually women's names are only mentioned in the Torah, in the Bible, when the women had a special role to play. And later on, we're going to see what that role is. Here we have Manasseh, Ephraim, their descendants, Benjamin, their descendants, and their amounts, Dan, Asher. Miriam and I were speaking yesterday. We wonder which tribe we're descended from. And maybe I'm Naphtali or Zebulun, because I like to be by the sea. Okay, so this is the enrollment of the Israelite men. So we know that there were 601,730 fighting men, which means if you take the women, the children, the Erev Rav, the servants, the people around us, they say it could be anywhere between 3 to 6 million people who were in the desert crossing over to go into the promised land. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, among these shall the land be apportioned as shares according to the listed names. So the land that they were going to be receiving was going to be divided up. The larger groups would have a larger share. The smaller groups would have a smaller share, which is normal. It was the same thing back in Egypt at Pesach, when they were to take an animal into the house. The larger families had to take a larger animal, or maybe even more, and the smaller would have a smaller. There'd be no waste. But everything was to be judged fairly, according to their ancestral tribes. Each portion shall be assigned by lot, whether larger or smaller. This is the enrollment of the Levites. We have Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. Those are the three sons. These are the clans of Levi. And then it goes to name the names. Here we have the name of Amram's wife. Amram was the father of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So here we see Amram's wife was Yocheved, the daughter of Levi. So they married within their own tribe, who was born to Levi in Egypt. She bore to Amram, Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, a very important family. To Aaron were born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Itamar. Now the first two died when they offered strange fire before the Lord. Their enrollment of 23,000 comprised of all males from 1 month up. So they were already chosen as a child to be part of the kahunat. They were not part of the regular enrollment of the Israelites, since no share of land was assigned to them among the Israelites. These are the males enrolled by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who registered the Israelites on the steppes of Moab. That's the border of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho. Among these, there was not one of those enrolled by Moses and Aaron the priest when they recorded the Israelites in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, they shall die in the wilderness. So all that generation, including Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, all died in the wilderness. Not one of them survived except for Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, the Kenizzite. He was not a Jew. He was not a Hebrew. He was not a natural born citizen of Israel. He was a Gentile. He was part of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who joined and became part of Israel, the same way as Ruth later. Here we read at the beginning how the Moabites were the enemy, but yet Ruth, her heart was for the God of Israel. And this is what God wants from us, Jew or Gentile. To be part of him, we need to love our God and obey his commandments. And so the only Joshua, Caleb and Joshua, the son of Nun, were able to enter the land. Now here we get to the daughters of Zelophehad, which we talked about before. They were from the Manasseh family, son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph. It's interesting. Maybe that's why we as Jews are always so interested in our genealogy. We're always looking to see where we come from. I know as far back as Kiev in 1906 with my great-grandfather, but I haven't studied before that. But here we get it from here because we are descended from these people. It's like Miriam would say, we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Miriam. I love that.
This Miriam, not Moses' sister.
No, maybe you, Miriam Berenbaum, exactly. And Peggy Pardo. The names of the daughters were Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. So here the names were mentioned twice. It was
that's why when people say Noah is a male's name, it's a male and female.
Exactly.
And never really.
Yeah, but I know modern day women named Noah in Israel. Now,
yeah, I have a good, yeah, right.
So they stood before Moses. Now remember, this is at a time when women had no rights. They could be sold as slaves. They couldn't work. They had to be with the male as their covering. But they stood before Moses, before Eleazar the priest. They stood before the chieftains and the entire assembly. Imagine the chutzpah to come before everyone at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And they said, our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of Korach's faction, the ones who banded together against the Lord, but he died for his own sin, and he left no sons. Don't let our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a share among our father's kinsmen, because each tribe was given a share of the land. So Moses brought their case before the Lord. Imagine if today we had someone who can bring our case directly to God. And the Lord said to Moses, the plea of Zelophehad's daughter is just. They're right. The Lord is saying that. You should give them a heritage among their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them. Furthermore, speak to the Israelite people as follows. If someone who is a householder dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his property to his daughter. If he has no daughter, assign his property to his brothers. If he has no brothers, assign his property to his father's brothers. If his father has no brothers, assign his property to the nearest relative in his own clan who shall inherit it. This shall be the law of procedure for the Israelites in accordance with Yud He Vav He's command to Moses. Yud He Vav He said to Moses, ascend these heights of Abarim and view the land that I have given to the Israelite people. That's all he would be allowed to do, was to see the land that he would not be able to enter. He had fought for 40 years to bring our people across the desert, but he was not allowed to enter. And there are several reasons that our sages say that he couldn't enter. One, we know because the Torah said that he took the glory away from God when the children of Israel were crying out and they had no water. And God told him to take his staff and speak to the rock. This was the second time. The first time he said, strike the rock with the staff. This time he said, speak to the rock. And Moses was so fed up with the people, he had lost his temper, and he hit the rock twice, and he said, should I bring forth water for you, you and me and Aaron? Look what you're making us do. He took the glory, because it was God who gave us water from the rock, not Moses, not the rod, not Aaron. It was God. Whenever we take the credit of something that God has done, we lose. And here he lost the right to go into the land. Our sages say another reason is because if we had gone into the land, our people are most people, and not only the Hebrews, most people are very quick to want to worship a man. And down throughout history, we have built people into icons. And it was time for Moses to step back and let the next generation take the lead. That's why Joshua was chosen, as we saw before. When you have seen it, you too shall be gathered to your relatives, just as your brother was. For in the wilderness of Zin, when the company was contentious, was fighting, you disobeyed my command. You see, he's telling us why. When the community was complaining, kvetching, you disobeyed my command to uphold my honor, my sanctity, my separateness from the other gods in their sight because of the water. Those are the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Tzin. And Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, let Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, I love this, look at he says, source of the breath of all flesh. That to me is so powerful. He is our source. Now he's telling, Moses is saying, let the Lord, who is the source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall take them out and bring them in. It's like a shepherd, so that the Lord's community may not be like sheep who have no shepherd. We have seen that because Moses had been the shepherd. He even had the rod. My rod and my staff, they comfort me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. He was the shepherd of Israel. And Moses is begging the Lord, please bring us another shepherd. And the Lord answered Moses, choose Jonathan, son of Nun, an inspired man. Do smicha, here, smicha, lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before Eliezer the Kohen, and before the entire community. Commission him in their sight. Give him his mission, what he's going to be doing. Invest in him some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community may obey. The community would not have followed Joshua if this had not happened. They needed to know that God put him in that position. He shall present himself to Eliezer the priest, who shall on behalf seek the decision of the Urim. Remember, these were like casting lots before the Lord. By such instruction, they shall go out, and by such instruction, they shall come in. He and all the Israelite army and the whole community. Moses did that as the Lord had commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eliezer the priest and before the whole community. Now imagine if we had this type of government today. This is the government that God wants. He never asked us for a democracy. Just because all the people say something is right doesn't make it right. He had chosen specific people to be able to go before him, go directly to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh would reveal himself in some way, either in a cloud of smoke, a column of cloud, or a column of fire by night, he would always find a way to speak, either speak as he spoke with Moses face to face. He would appear to Aaron in the veil in the Holy of Holies. It was a direct communication with our God. That's what God offered us. And we turned away from him. We didn't want it. Instead, we said, bring us a king. Boy, he laid his hands upon him and commissioned him as the Lord had spoken through Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, command the people, the Israelite people, and say to them, be punctilious in presenting to me, or be, what's the word? Be really, really serious about this. Be really definite in presenting to me at stated times the offerings of food due me as offerings by fire. In other words, there would be his appointed times. It couldn't be just any time of the year. It would be on Shabbat. It would be on the other Moedim. Whenever, here, it says, here, to bring to me, like, ha-kariv li ha-moedo, the offerings at his Moedim, his appointed times, which were Pesach, Shavuot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of the the Lamb. Then we have Shavuot, and then in the fall, we have Yom Teruah, the blowing of the shofar, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shabbat, which covers them all. Be serious about these. Punctilious. Say to them, these are the offerings by fire that you are to present to Adonai. As a regular burnt offering every year, 2 young lambs without a blemish. Offer 1 lamb in the morning.
It was every day. You said every year, just to be.
Oh, every day. 2 yearlings. Right, I'm ahead of myself. My ADD. You shall offer 1 lamb in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at twilight. The Kohanim had a huge job sacrificing, killing these animals. It was a huge job. That's why they had to retire at 55. As a meal offering, because it wasn't always an offering of blood, we had grain offerings, 1/10 of choice flour, 1/4 of hin of beaten oil mixed in. With this, they would make bread. They would make matzah. At Pesach, the regular burnt offering instituted at Mount Sinai, an offering of fire of pleasing aroma to the Lord. And what was pleasing was not the offering itself. What was pleasing to him was that we would come to him, that we would be willing to bring our offerings. That would be pleasing, not the death of animals.
It's so easy, though, for people just reading this, like, to think that God could be appeased or whatever. Even when people were killed, like what just happened, like they were just being formed as a people, and to have this kind of these regular encounters and communications with the creator of the universe was forming the nation of Israel to be the ambassadors to the whole world.
Exactly.
It was so important.
Exactly.
So it wasn't that he wanted to be appeased. That's what it looks like sometimes. I want offerings to appease my anger or whatever.
No, at all. It's not what it looks like. The offerings were only going to be for a time because he was weaning us away from the offerings to idols.
Right.
So the offerings would then point to him, and eventually the offerings would disappear so that our eyes would remain on him, if only. Then the other lamb would be offered at twilight. Here on Sabbath, 2 yearlings, the same type of things. On the new moon, the Rosh Chodesh, we were to present offerings, not at any time that we want. Today, we see a world filled with all kinds of every holiday that you can imagine. Christmas, Easter, those are the Christian holidays, but we have every, July the 4th, July the 1st, Canada Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. We want holidays, I understand, but God has given us ones that would be pleasing to him, so that we would come to him. These holidays that we have, that we've built, that we've made, usually are more stressful on the families than on these beautiful offerings when we would go before God and have, and he would forgive us for the things that we have done. Now I'm going to pass through these things here. The first month, on the 14th day of the month, is a Pesach. On the 15th day of the month, we should eat unleavened bread for 7 days. These are his holidays that he has given us. And we should not work at our occupations on those sacred holidays. Those were for him, not to work. I'll continue down. Okay, 7th. This is the feast of the first fruits, the feast of weeks, Shavuot, when we bring an offering of our new grain, always to bring offerings to him. And the offerings we were to take to him. He would also, it would also be always the kach. It was like he had provided for us. We take a portion, first fruits, as our forefathers did, was usually a 10th. We would take a 10th of what he had already given us and give it back to him, so that the temple, the Mishkan, the Kohanim could be provided for, that they didn't have to worry about how they were going to make a living while they were doing all this intermediary work between us and our God. And I'm going to pass by these. Okay, let me continue. On the 10th day of the 7th month, you shall observe a sacred offering where you shall practice self-denial. This is an interpretation. The word here is initem. The word ani means to humble yourself before God. The self-denial is how they've come up with the whole idea of fasting. But we didn't fast.
This is Yom Kippur.
That's Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we were to bring an animal and we would eat. We were to do no work. So it's not about self-denial, it's about humility, humbling ourselves. And we see that one of the things that drove Pinchas to kill those two young men, the two young people, were the extreme arrogance of their action to go in front of the whole community with such an attitude of rebellion that their God, Baal Peor, had won over the God of Israel. And then he saw that the plague had broken out because of it. And if we look at all the plagues throughout history, and I'm going to be speaking about that this coming Shabbat, we're going to see how many plagues have hit this planet over the thousands of years. And guaranteed, if we really research it, we'll see that the moral turpitude of the people at the time was so bad that a plague broke out. But I'm for sure we wouldn't have realized it. But if you look at the Torah, these are examples for us. These are samples. These are prototypes for us to know what to do and what not to do. Okay, and then we have here, we're continuing with the holy days and what they're here. We see on this would be on Sukkot, because we have on the first day there would be an offering, sin offering. The second day, 12 bulls, third day 11 bulls. It's like and a partridge in a pear tree. It's probably where they got this from. 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14. And I'm not going to read it all because we can read these ourselves. But these are all offerings that we are to bring to God at his time, in his place, not wherever we wanted, but where he asked us to. You shall offer to Yud He Vav He at the stated times, here, Moedim again, in addition to your free will offerings. There were other offerings during the year. Burnt offerings, meal offerings, libations, offerings of well-being. And then Moses spoke to the Israelites just as the Lord had commanded. And that's the end of this portion of Pinchas.
I find like sometimes when I'm reading or when I'm hearing these readings, it's like, to me, the beginning, it's not the literal beginning of the world, but it's God unfolding his message to us to be taken to the world. And I see slowly how one person breaks away and does his own thing. And like, I don't know, it gets bigger and bigger and spreads out and people are all over the planet. I wonder if we were to trace all our lineages back, if you would see some sort of pattern, like, those who contributed to the building of the golden calf, if you'd see 20 million families ahead, what their kids were doing, like, how did this all start? Like, everything spreads out from this almost template or
exactly. It is a template.
It's all spreading out.
Yeah.
And it's really simple in a way, but it's magnificent.
It
is.
Like
this pattern is like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It's when I first saw that this story is a prototype for us to, and it's repeated throughout our history over and over and over, and it's repeating today. We see it again today, the plagues that are still hitting us. But most people don't look at it as, it's something that we've done. It's
and also like when we talk about free will, which I agree that there's free will, but then people will ask me, or I'll ask myself, how could, for example, a war be the consequence of free will? But it's not the consequence in the same way we think of it. Like,
I don't know what you mean.
No, like when we have free will, and you could say you have free will, so things are a consequence of our free will. We have the will to
choose to be at peace, or we choose to be at war.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay.
But if you take it too literally, we can't always see how the consequences of what we do are what they are.
Right.
Like, so sometimes you could say, oh, how could it be that there's a huge war going on? Who chose? Nobody chose that. But slowly you see through this unfolding that one act of arrogance leads to this, and that leads to something else. It's not always the way we think.
No.
It's a disobedience has consequences.
Exactly.
And maybe we don't even see it. Like today, I think, was the 10th anniversary of the train wreck up up northern, that big train, the beginning.
Right.
Remember,
it begins with an M. I forgot the name. Yeah.
Anyway, so it was the 10th anniversary, and it's a horrible thing. People were talking their families and blah blah blah, and we can't. We could have a tendency to say, well, God is punishing us for that or whatever. But we can't say that. But there are consequences in a way that we can't really know.
Exactly.
But the world was not created, I don't believe, to be like that.
No.
That's not God's doing. But the ball is rolling now, and the people doing whatever they want, like in the times of the judges. and their consequences.
Well, it started with the picture of the two sons of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel.
Yeah,
Cain went to war against his brother.
yeah,
So there were, I doubt there were only two people in the world at the time. I believe they were also a prototype, and God must have created more, because Cain traveled, and who did he marry? So, you know, um, not everything is spelled out for us, but the world had a very small population then. But the heart of man has not changed from the time of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve were given one rule: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or for that day you'll die. And at Mount Sinai, we're then given 10 rules. The rules are simple. These young people broke the rule, but they broke it with such rebellion and what an attitude.
yeah.
And God hates that pride.
Yeah,
And
can you imagine the pride when with what's the two that were Zimri and Cosby and
yeah,
it's bad enough what they did, but they came out just when Moses had relayed to them the idea that they were to kill those who they knew that took part in the rebellion.
right.
So already justice was being meted out, and people were crying because there might be that one of their loved ones would have to be killed, whatever it was. In the midst of that, they come out with such arrogance.
Exactly. To me, it's a little bit like when you talk about pride. I think today of the gay pride parades. Now, if someone decides to go against what Torah says and be gay or homosexual or lesbian, whatever they want, that's their business. And it's their business. They will have to answer to God. I'm not judging them in the same way that, someone is a thief. There's no, a sin is a sin, period. If you're doing something that goes against God's order, then it's wrong. But the arrogance of the pride parade of people who march down the street wearing in such a sexual deviant way. And the problem isn't only them, but it's also the people who attend the parade. People who may not like what they see, but they just go, and they have their children on their shoulders looking at this. This is arrogance. This is pride that God does not want us to have. Pride, pride comes before a fall, they say. And I know that wherever I get too proud, or whenever I've become too proud in any area of my life, and pride is not the same as being happy with something that you've accomplished. You could feel good about something that you've done, knowing that in partnership with the Creator who's given you the gifts and the talents, that you can do something. There's a difference between lording it over other people. I'm better than you. There's an arrogance that comes out. God said this. No, I'm doing this. And that's what Pinchas reacted to. And, he didn't do it out of a sense of vengeance, because he knew, I really believe Pinchas was humble. You don't hear anything about him afterwards. He was
Sorry, about what?
Pinchas.
Oh, yeah, right.
You don't hear him like Korach, who wanted position, who wanted to be known for what he did. Pinchas acted in the moment. It was an act of passion, of zeal. It wasn't premeditated murder. It wasn't vengeful. He knows vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So his was just an act that said, you know what? This plague is going to kill the rest of the people. I better get up and do something, and do it now. And sometimes we have to just do that. We have to just stand up in the moment and say, no, call a spade a spade. This is wrong. And if we don't say anything and we just go weeping at the tent without really standing up for God, what are we doing? So there's a lot in this portion. It's really very powerful. Jerry, you've been very, very quiet. I'm sorry I didn't have you read tonight. But I just felt I was on a roll.
No, it's you read well.
It was good. It was good. As you saw, I was a little bit hoarse today, so I thought that was it and was good for me.
Oh,
Thank you.
perfect. Perfect. So is that Jerry, do you have any comments on
No,
what
I
you
was just relaxing, but it's fine.
I know you think.
Oh, you know, eh?
I know you think. Whether you want to say it is another story.
Well, it's right. Yeah. So can I tell you a joke?
You tell me a joke. Yeah, you can tell us a joke.
I'm only kidding. I was going to
Okay.
say, so I'm a thinker, not a talker, but I'm only joking.
That's okay. Thinking is good, but sometimes we have to express what we think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Especially as the world becomes darker, and it is becoming darker. We become, our light needs to shine more. And I thought of how the time, we're not at the time of the evilness, at the time of Sodom, when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, Lot was willing to sacrifice his own daughters when the angels came. And here we see that the Midianites offered their own daughters to these sexual rites to entice the Israeli men. And when we give up our children in horrible ways against God's will, we're going to see reaction from
I think
God.
that's one of the reasons, like when people say, including me, I used to think, how could God allow this sort of thing, like a plague and this and that? But when Israel as a people were bowing down to idols, that included human sacrifice.
Exactly, and sexual deviancy, and all kinds of things,
all of that,
and no mercy. No mercy. They would.
I'm saying it's not just what. Okay, people could say, well, they were.
No, it's not just bowing down to a statue.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's everything that entails.
Exactly.
No
Horrible
value
rituals,
of life.
cursing.
Nothing about life was sacred. Could you imagine taking your child and burning it? It's so beyond horrific.
How different is it than
stopped.
today when they strap a bomb on a Muslim child and say, go blow yourself up?
It's horrifying.
How different? Exactly. It's horrible.
Yeah.
When Israel goes to attack in retaliation in the Palestinian territories or wherever they're attacking, they send down flyers to say, this is where we're going to directly hit, because we know that the target is there. But then what do? They put their children and their women, they leave them in the building. They don't let them leave because they want the Israelis to be blamed. This is horrid. It's a horrid thing that we're saying. So anyway, so what I was saying was about Sodom and Gomorrah, when God destroyed the earth the first time, it was with a flood. And there are accounts of floods all over the world and in so many countries. And I believe it to be true. And God said, when he put the rainbow in the sky, which has been kidnapped by a group of people, the rainbow no longer belongs to us. Now it's part of the gay parade, but we can take it back because God gave us the rainbow. It was a sign that never again would he destroy the world with a flood. But what he said, it would be destroyed by fire. So I'm not surprised that it's getting hotter and hotter in the planet. And it has nothing to do with the environment. It has to do with our behavior, how we treat each other, and how we look at the Creator. We make him a laughing stock. And we have to start turning back to our God. All these, I hear so many discussions about ways that they're going to heal the planet, help the world. all Band-Aids.
Go to jail for telling somebody to stay straight.
Exactly. Well, don't arrest me. Don't tell anybody, Brian.
That's me too. If I have to, I don't mind going to solitary.
You don't mind going, you already are in solitary. Yeah. Anyway, well, I don't want to go to jail, but all I know is that, if I have a choice and I have to go to jail, then that's so be it. Jerry, do you want to read the Aaronic benediction tonight for us?
It's blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has commanded Kohanim with the holiness of Aaron, and commanded Kohanim to bless the people Israel with love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'dushasoi shel Aaron, v'tzivon levarech es amo Yisrael, v'yahavo. Yevarechecho Adonai, v'yishmerecho Yoel Adonai Pono Elecho V'choneko Yiso Adonai Pono Elecho Ve'yosem Lecho Shalom. V'samu et shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani arvorachem.
And as our Kohanim blessed Israel, as you just blessed us, this is what you said, Jerry. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his Brit Shalom, his covenant of peace. So shall they put his name, so shall we put his name upon us, and he will bless us. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this wonderful parasha Pinchas. Next week we will look at Matot Maseh, and we'll see you. I can wish you from Wednesday night Shabbat Shalom, and
Shabbat Shalom.
thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.